It begins, not with a scream, but with a silence, a specific, swallowing silence that falls where a child's laughter should be. In the sweltering summer of 1979, in the sprawling, humid heart of Atlanta, a predator was hunting. He moved through the city not as a monster from the shadows, but as a man. He drove the streets of neighborhoods like Vine City and Bowen Homes, with his windows down, his car just another anonymous vehicle in the heat. His eyes, patient and calculating, scanned the corners, the cracked sidewalks, the dusty lots where children played. He wasn't looking for a struggle. He was looking for an opening, a moment of need. He would offer $1 for a cold drink, a promise of lucrative work moving boxes, a story about being a talent scout in a community where children were raised to be respectful, to trust their elders. That trust was the sharpest weapon in his arsenal. He was an angler in a river of innocence, and his bait was a carefully crafted illusion of opportunity. This is the story of a city grappling with a terror it could not name, a story of a grief so profound it seeped into the very soil. It is the story of an investigation that became a labyrinth of pressure, politics, and forensic desperation, and the enigmatic, unsettling figure at its center, a man named Wayne Bertram Williams. To understand the cataclysm, you must first understand the world it shattered. Atlanta in the late 1970s was a city of stark duality. It was the city too busy to hate, a gleaming beacon of the New South, its skyline punctuated by new skyscrapers, its economy booming. But for the working-class black families in its southwestern enclaves, this prosperity was a spectacle viewed from a distance. Theirs was a world of modest clapboard houses, of porch swings creaking in the evening air, of mothers calling children home at dusk, a world woven tightly together by shared struggle, faith, and resilience. It was a community that raised its children collectively, where everyone knew their neighbor's child. This was the fabric that was about to be torn, thread by agonizing thread. 14-year-old Edward Hope Smith, a bright-eyed boy with an easy smile, left his home to visit a friend. He never arrived. The panic was immediate, but local. Then just 4 days later, 13-year-old Alfred Evans vanished. The two disappearances were a tremor, but when their bodies were discovered weeks apart, discarded in the same overgrown, neglected lot, the city's first grim secret burial ground, the tremor became an earthquake. The official report suggested a tragic coincidence, but the families knew. They felt a cold gathering dread, and the disappearances did not stop. They accelerated. Milton Harvey, 14, Yusuf Bell, 9, Angel Lanier, 12, Jeffrey Mathis, 10, a name, a face, a story, extinguished. The fear was no longer an emotion. It was a physical presence, a new element in the Atlanta air. It smelled of ozone and despair. Parents began escorting their children to school bus stops and watching them until the bus disappeared from view. They organized patrols. They painted their children's fingernails a stark, bright red, a macabre innovation, a desperate identifier for a worst-case scenario. The sound of a car slowing down without cause was enough to send a child sprinting, heart hammering, for the safety of their front door. From this cauldron of anguish emerged a force of nature, Camille Bell. Her son Yusuf, a polite and deeply religious boy who loved to run errands for neighbors, was one of the stolen. Her grief did not consume her. It forged her into a warrior. She became the fierce, articulate, and unrelenting voice of the Committee to Stop Children's Murder. She stood before a forest of microphones, her eyes hollowed by unspeakable loss but burning with a ferocious demand for justice. She shamed the city. She challenged the police. She mobilized national attention. She was the conscience Atlanta could not ignore. The official investigation was a leviathan, slow to wake and then frantic in its movements. The Atlanta Police Department, initially dismissive, was soon overwhelmed. The FBI was called. A multi-agency task force, swelled to over 100 officers drowning in a sea of paper. Over 30,000 tips would be processed. They chased phantoms, leads pointing to the clan, to secretive cults, to a group of corrupt police officers. The pressure was immense, emanating from the White House down to the terrified streets. In a groundbreaking move, they turned to forensic science, to a discipline then in its relative infancy, fiber analysis. They began collecting every carpet sample, every unique textile, from every suspect's world, creating a library of the mundane that they hoped would tell an extraordinary story. And all the while a figure moved on the periphery of this chaos. Wayne Williams. To the world he was an ambitious, garrulous, and somewhat peculiar 23-year-old, a self-styled music promoter and freelance photographer. He carried business cards that promised stardom. He was a talker, a name dropper, a young man who dreamed of managing the next great R&B act, and who seemed to believe his own burgeoning mythology. He was so confident, so present, that he even inserted himself into the investigation, volunteering as a citizen informant, calling the tip line with theories, positioning himself as a helper. He was the last person anyone would suspect, a fact that became his most effective camouflage. His methods were a chilling masterpiece of social engineering. He didn't need violence to initiate contact. He offered aspiration, an audition for a non-existent record label, a photo shoot for a modeling portfolio, a chance to be on television. To a teenager in a neighborhood where dreams often withered on the vine, his offers were a siren song. He presented a door to a bigger world, and they stepped through it. He would gain their trust, settle them into the passenger seat of his 1970 Chevrolet station wagon, and then the door to that bigger world would slam shut forever. The city was hunting a savage, but the savage was wearing the mask of a benefactor. The psychological portrait of Wayne Williams is a puzzle of jarring contradictions. He was the only child of two respected, middle-class school teachers, Homer and Faye Williams. He grew up in a home that valued education and discipline, yet he was a fantasist, building a fragile empire of self-importance from his parents' basement. He craved authority and recognition, but had no legitimate means to achieve it. Was the act of killing a perverted, ultimate expression of control, a way to command the narrative, to become the most important person in the city, the architect of its fear, the subject of its manhunt? In his warped reality, he was no longer a failed promoter. He was the central character in a city-wide drama of his own making. His reign of terror ended, as these stories often do, not with a brilliant deduction, but with a mundane mistake. Just after 2 a.m. on May 22, 1981, two police officers were staked out on the James Jackson Parkway Bridge, watching the dark swirling waters of the Chattahoochee River. They heard a loud, unmistakable splash downstream. Moments later, headlights approached. A car was leaving the bridge. They stopped the driver, a young bespectacled man who was polite, almost chatty. He was Wayne Williams. He claimed he was on his way to audition a singer named Cheryl Johnson. He was calm, too calm. His story was plausible, but it had cracks. He couldn't provide an address. 2 days later, the body of 27-year-old Nathaniel Cater, the last known victim, was pulled from the river downstream. The net finally was closed. The case against Wayne Williams was a monument to circumstantial evidence. There were no eyewitnesses to murder. No murder weapon was ever found. The prosecution's case was built on a mountain of tiny, silent witnesses. Fiber, 28 different types of synthetic threads, a violet acetate from his carpet, a rare greenish-gray nylon from his bedspread, a distinctive trilobal carpet fiber, found only in certain early 70s Chevrolets. Even caught yellowish dog hairs from his German Shepherd were meticulously matched to victims' clothing and bodies. The prosecution wove a narrative of an invisible leash, a trail of microscopic evidence that placed these victims in his car, in his home. It was a forensic tapestry of guilt. In February 1982, after a tense and sensational trial, Wayne Williams was found guilty of the murders of Nathaniel Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne, two adult men and sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms. A verdict had been delivered. The city, holding its breath for 2 long years, finally exhaled. But the exhale was not a sigh of relief. It was a gasp of unresolved tension. The conviction of Wayne Williams for 2 murders became the convenient key that officially locked away 22 other child murder cases. And this is the chilling, lingering shadow that falls across this story, a shadow that has only grown longer with the passing decades. Did one man, acting alone, truly have the time, the energy, the sheer logistical capacity to execute this vast multi-year campaign of abduction and murder? The lack of any direct physical evidence linking Williams to the murders of the youngest children, the persistent, credible theories of clan involvement, and even the possibility of multiple copycat killers, the nagging inconsistencies in the fiber evidence. All of it forms a chorus of doubt that has never been silent. Wayne Williams, from his prison cell, has vociferously maintained his innocence for over 40 years, a living, breathing reminder that the official story may be neat, but the truth is often messy, complex, and infinitely more terrifying. The legal system provided a conclusion. It gave the city a name and a face for its monster, but for the families of the lost children, for the mothers who still hear the ghost of a laugh, for the fathers who still glance at a faded photograph, the truth is a heavier, more complicated, but it lives in the quiet of an empty bedroom, in the questions that will die with a generation, and in the unsettling, profound possibility that the full dark history of the Atlanta child murders is a story we have still not been brave enough or thorough enough to completely uncover. If you found this story haunting, don't stop here. Watch our next case, where another hidden truth finally comes to light.